In the vast untamed expanse of the American West, where dust and sun were constant companions, and every breath carried the scent of sweat, wood smoke, and resilient hope, lay the small sun-baked town of Redemption. Here, a name echoed, not from the crack of a pistol, but from the chilling call of a soul up for sale, Ilara. It was the year 1872, and the frontier in its brutal indifference often forced the most desperate exchanges. The auction stage, crudely constructed in Redemption's dusty town square, was a grim spectacle. Eyes hardened by the sun and the harsh realities of life swept over the meager offerings. A few scrawny cattle, some worn tools. But today, the merchandise was a human being. A young woman draped in a coarse frayed canvas sack that barely concealed her form, only her vivid blue eyes, visible two haunting pools, reflecting the endless desert sky. She was Ilara, sold to settle a debt, a burden left behind by a family ravaged by sickness and starvation. The auctioneer's voice, dry and devoid of pity, barked out the bid's each word, a fresh wound to her dwindling hope. $20. Who'll give me 25? A strong young woman knows housework, can bear children. $20. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs, each beat a desperate plea for escape. Her breath hitched in her throat, a cold dread creeping up her spine. Once she had been a girl with hair like spun gold in the sunlight, eyes bright, with an unclouded future. Now she was merely a shadow, an object of possession, her fate determined by a few miserable coins. Shame and despair welled up, threatening to drown her in an abyss of nothingness. She squeezed her eyes shut, wishing she could simply dissolve into the air, become an invisible speck of dust in the relentless desert wind. Amidst the clamor of the crowd, a tall, silent figure stood apart. It was Cale, a solitary rancher, whose quiet demeanor and weathered face told tales of solitude and unspoken burdens. He wasn't a man to frequent town, preferring the company of the open range and his small herd. He had come to Redemption for supplies, a rare necessity that had brought him face to face with this unsettling scene. He was not one to mingle, and certainly not one to get involved in the grim transactions of the human market. But when his gaze fell upon Ilara's fear-filled blue eyes, something stirred within his hardened soul. He saw in them not just terror, but a flicker of indomitable spirit, a fierce will to survive, desperately trying to break free. $25. A burly, unshaven man sneered, his eyes glinting with lecherous intent as he stared at Ilara, making her instinctively recoil. Cale had no intention of participating in this grim auction. He was a man of the land of quiet honesty, not of trafficking in human souls. Yet the burly man's sneer, coupled with Ilara's profound despair, ignited an impulse in him he hadn't known he possessed. It wasn't pity, not entirely. It was a deep-seated revulsion for the injustice unfolding before him, a quiet defiance against the cruelty of it all. $50. Cale's voice, deep and gravelly, cut through the square's commotion. The crowd fell silent. All eyes turned to him, surprised by the unexpected bid. $50 was a significant sum, enough to buy a small herd of cattle or keep a ranch running for months. The burly man gaped about to retort, but Cale's cold, unwavering gaze, devoid of emotion, yet radiating quiet authority, made him falter. Even the auctioneer, taken aback, quickly recovered his composure. $50. Going once, going twice. Sold to the gentleman. Ilara felt a jolt of electricity course through her. She had been sold, but the buyer was a stranger, a man whose eyes, though steely, held no hint of the crude desire she had come to expect. Cale approached, saying nothing, merely gesturing for her to follow. Ilara hesitated, her limbs heavy with the weight of her new, uncertain destiny, then slowly moved each step, a testament to a will she didn't know she still possessed. Kale led Ilara away from the bustling town, their journey taking them deep into a secluded valley, where his small, unassuming cabin lay hidden. The air around the simple dwelling, crafted from rough-hewn logs, smelled of pine and wood smoke. It was a humble place, with a single room, serving as both living space and kitchen, and a small adjacent bedroom. "You can stay here," Kale said, his voice still low and devoid of overt emotion. "There's water and food. You're free to do as you wish, so long as you cause no trouble and respect this home." Ilara was astonished. She had braced herself for a life of servitude, for insults and abuse. But Kale made no such demands. He treated her with the quiet respect of a host towards a guest, as if she were a free woman. He asked no questions about her past, forced no labor upon her. His unspoken deference was a luxury she had never known, a stark contrast to the dehumanizing experience she had just endured. Initially, Ilara remained cautious, keeping her distance from Kale, her eyes constantly observing him. She helped him clean the cabin, prepared meals, her movements tentative, her silence a shield. Kale, too, maintained his solitude, often leaving to tend to his cattle or work the land, returning only at night. Two solitary souls, two isolated worlds coexisting under one roof, yet separated by invisible walls of unspoken pain and guarded hearts. One evening, a fierce sandstorm swept through the valley. The cabin rattled and groaned under the onslaught, the wind howling through the cracks like a tormented spirit. Ilara huddled in a corner, trembling with fear, memories of past abandonment and vulnerability swirling in her mind. Kyle, sitting by the hearth, noticed her shivers. He quietly rose, retrieved a thick blanket from his bedroll, and gently draped it over her shoulders. "Don't be afraid," he said, his voice for the first time carrying a hint of warmth, a softness that cut through the raging storm outside. "It will pass soon enough. You're safe here." That small gesture, a simple act of human kindness, began to thaw a corner of Ilara's frozen heart. She looked up at him, and in the dancing light of the fire, she saw not just a stoic exterior, but a profound sense of loneliness, almost an ancient sorrow, in his gray eyes. She realized that Kale was just as solitary as she was, perhaps even more so, burdened by a quiet grief she couldn't yet comprehend. Slowly, gradually, Ilara began to open up. The silence between them, once a barrier, began to feel like a comfortable space for shared existence. One evening, after a simple supper, she found herself speaking, her voice a hesitant whisper at first, then gaining strength as she recounted her story, the illness that claimed her family, the desperate poverty, and the horrifying truth of how her own kin had sold her. Her voice trembled sometimes, catching in her throat, tears blurring her vision. But Kale remained listening with an unwavering presence. He never interrupted, never judged, only occasionally nodded his gaze, steady, a silent testament to his profound understanding and empathy. I used to be a joyful girl," Ilara confessed, the words raw, aching. "But now, I just feel like a broken thing, a scar." Kale looked at her, his gaze softening, a rare depth of emotion surfacing in his usually impassive eyes. "A scar doesn't define who you are, Ilara. It's just a part of the story you've lived. It shows how much you've endured, how strong you were to survive. It shows your journey." His words were a powerful balm, a soothing antidote to years of self-condemnation and external judgment. They began to mend the raw wounds of Ilara's soul. She felt an odd, deep-seated connection with this man. He was no dashing hero from the dime novels, but he was the one who had brought her the quiet acceptance and profound peace she had desperately craved. He truly saw her beyond the physical scars and the humiliating past. One afternoon, while Ilara was helping Kale with some mending, she noticed a worn leather pouch that had fallen from his coat. Inside, nestled amongst some dry rations and a few loose coins, was a faded photograph. It depicted a young woman with a warm, radiant smile and a small, laughing boy. Ilara's breath caught in her throat as her eyes fixed on a specific detail, a distinctive crescent moon necklace worn by the woman. A chill ran down her spine. She had seen that necklace before. Who are these people? Ilara asked, her voice barely audible, thick, with a sudden overwhelming sense of familiarity and dread. Kale, startled, quickly reached for the pouch, his usual calm momentarily shattered. It's nothing, Ilara. He stammered, his eyes clouded with pain, but Ilara persisted, her heart pounding with a dawning realization. The necklace. I've seen it. 3 years ago, in the midst of a terrible blizzard, I was lost near death from the cold and starvation. A woman found me. She was wearing that exact necklace. She saved my life. Kale froze, his hand hovering over the pouch. His gray eyes, usually so guarded, widened, staring at Ilara as if she were a ghost from his past or a miracle standing before him. You were that child, he whispered, his voice raw with disbelief and a sudden surge of ancient grief. Ilara nodded, tears finally flowing freely, not just for herself, but for the echoes of shared loss that now hung in the air. She gave me food, warmed me. She said she would find help, but she never came back. I thought she must have perished. Kale finally sat down, the strength seeming to drain from him. A deep sigh escaped his lips, laden with years of unexpressed sorrow. That was my wife Lyra, and our son Finn. They were taken from me, not by the storm, but by the same cruel men who later established a ruthless hold over these lands. Men who now extort and dominate, twisting the law to their own ends. I've been trying to find a way to expose them, to bring them to justice ever since. This painful intertwined truth, this shared thread of suffering and miraculous survival, connected the two solitary souls in a way far deeper than any words could convey. Ilara realized Kale was not just her rescuer, but a man scarred by a loss that paralleled her own, a loss that had occurred just after an act of selfless kindness. And Kale, in Ilara, found not just a woman needing protection, but a living testament to Lyra's compassion, a last fragile link to the goodness his family had embodied, and a new reason to seek a form of justice that could bring peace, not just vengeance. Their individual burdens began to lighten, shared between them. Their lives became inextricably linked. They navigated their shared sorrow, finding solace in each other's quiet presence, a growing understanding, blossoming into something akin to love. Kale continued his work, but now with a renewed sense of purpose. It wasn't about revenge. It was about ensuring that no one else suffered the fate of his family or Ilara. He sought to expose the powerful, corrupt figures who operated behind the scenes, pulling the strings of local power and exploiting the vulnerable. One day, news arrived in Redemption that sent a ripple of unease through the valley. The notorious Iron Syndicate, a shadowy organization known for its ruthless land grabs, exploitative labor practices, and the quiet disappearance of anyone who stood in its way, was planning to formally acquire all the land in the valley, including Kale's ranch, and by extension, Ilara's fragile claim to freedom. The syndicate operated with a veneer of legality, using forged documents and bribed officials to expand their empire. They were the very force that had benefited from the chaos and despair that led to Lyra's death and Ilara's auction. They're coming for everything, Cale said, his voice grim, but without the usual coldness. There was a weary determination in it now. They'll use their legal papers to drive everyone out, just like they did to so many others. They're the ones behind the suffering in this territory. Ilara's heart pounded. This was not a personal vendetta for Cale. This was about justice for an entire community, about preventing the very exploitation she had experienced. We can't let them, she declared, her blue eyes blazing with a newfound resolve. We have to fight back, Cale. Not with guns, not if we can avoid it, but with truth. We have to expose them. Cale looked at her, a flicker of surprise, then admiration in his eyes. He had been preparing for a lonely, direct confrontation. Ilara's perspective offered a different, more powerful path. How, he asked. We find proof, Ilara stated. Proof of their illegal dealings, their threats, their corrupt agreements. There must be someone who knows someone they've silenced. We show everyone what they truly are. Their search for evidence was painstaking and dangerous. They spoke to terrified homesteaders, wary prospectors, and a few brave, disillusioned former associates of the syndicate. Ilara, with her quiet persistence and ability to gain trust, proved invaluable. She listened to whispered rumors, uncovered hidden ledgers, and slowly, meticulously pieced together a damning picture of the syndicate's operations. Cale used his knowledge of the land and his reputation for integrity to navigate treacherous situations and protect Ilara from those who sensed their growing threat. The climax of their struggle came when the syndicate's legal representatives arrived in Redemption, backed by a contingent of armed enforcers ready to formalize their land claims in a rigged town meeting. The air in the packed saloon, serving as the makeshift town hall, was thick with tension and fear. The syndicate's lead agent, a slick, self-assured man named Thorn, began to read out the decrees, his voice dripping with false authority. As Thorn presented his irrefutable documents, Ilara, stepping forward from the nervous crowd, raised her hand. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the oppressive silence. "I believe there are some inaccuracies in your claims, and perhaps some missing documents." Thorn scowled, unused to being challenged. "And who might you be, young woman? Do you understand the law?" "I understand justice," Ilara replied, her gaze firm, meeting his without flinching. She then began to lay out the evidence they had gathered, a ledger detailing illegal transactions, sworn affidavits from intimidated witnesses, even a map showing land boundaries illegally altered. Her words were precise, irrefutable, exposing the syndicate's web of deceit. She spoke not of revenge, but of the truth of the innocent lives disrupted, of the fundamental right to own one's land and freedom. The crowd began to murmur, fear giving way to a flicker of hope and indignation. Cale stood silently by Ilara's side, his presence a shield, his hand resting on the hilt of his holstered pistol, a silent promise of protection if things turned violent. Thorn, flustered and enraged, ordered his enforcers to silence Ilara, but the townsfolk, galvanized by Ilara's courage and the irrefutable evidence, began to rally. Elias, the retired sheriff who had quietly observed Cale and Ilara's efforts, stepped forward, lending his own credibility and past authority to Ilara's claims. Faced with undeniable proof and a newly defiant populace, the syndicate's facade crumbled. Their legal claims were exposed as fraudulent, their power broken. The enforcers, seeing their position compromised, slunk away. Justice, in a truer, more enduring form than any personal retribution, had been served. The threat of the Iron Syndicate was broken, and the valley was safe once more. Cale and Ilara had not simply survived. They had changed their world. In the quiet months that followed, Kyle and Ilara began to build a new life, not just for themselves, but for their community. The ranch flourished a beacon of stability and self-sufficiency. They established a small informal school for the children of the valley, and Kale, with Ilara's help, became a trusted advisor, helping others navigate legal complexities and protect their land from future exploitation. One crisp autumn morning, under a sky as vast and forgiving as the open range, Kyle and Ilara stood before Elias, who had returned this time not as a lawman, but as a friend to officiate their wedding. There was no grand ceremony, no formal attire, just the two of them, their hands clasped firmly, and the quiet dignity of a life truly earned. Ilara wore a simple cream-colored dress, but in her hand, instead of a bouquet, she held a small, intricately embroidered piece of canvas. It was a remnant of the very sack that had once covered her in the auction, now softened, cleaned, and transformed. She had embroidered a delicate crescent moon on it, a tribute to Lyra, the woman who had saved her, and to the enduring bond that linked them all. Kale looked at her. His gray eyes, once filled with profound sorrow, now radiated a deep, unwavering love. Ilara smiled, her blue eyes sparkling free of fear, filled with a radiant happiness that seemed to light up the entire valley. The transformed canvas, once a symbol of humiliation and despair, had become a testament to her victory, her reclamation of self, and her unwavering spirit. Kale Ilara said, her voice clear and resonant, like a desert spring. "Do you take this Ilara with all her scars and all her stories to be your wife?" "I do." Kale replied, his voice deep and warm, echoing with the promise of a future built on acceptance and shared purpose. "I take you, Ilara, and I love you for all you've been through and for all you are becoming, for the courage you brought into my life, and for the justice we found together." They sealed their vows with a kiss, a quiet promise exchanged between two souls who had found their true home, not in a place, but in each other. They had not forgotten their pasts, but they had embraced them, transforming pain into purpose and despair into enduring hope. They had found their redemption, not just in the name of a town, but in the profound healing of their own hearts and the blossoming of a love that defied all odds. A lesson from the Dust and Stars life in its unpredictable journey will inevitably leave its marks upon us, sometimes deep, unyielding scars. But these scars do not define who we are. They are a testament to our endurance, a reminder of the battles we've survived. We always have a choice to let the weight of the past crush us, or to transform our experiences into strength and compassion. True strength lies not in seeking vengeance, but in pursuing justice, in healing wounds, and in building bridges where chasms once existed. Sometimes the unwavering acceptance and genuine love from another can be the guiding light, illuminating our path, helping us to heal and to find a profound sense of self-redemption. Remember, every individual deserves to be loved and to be free to shape their own future, regardless of the burdens they once carried. Join our journey through the Wild West. Did Ilara and Kale's story of resilience, justice, and enduring love stir something in your heart? Was there a moment that moved you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales of courage, love, and redemption from the untamed heart of the American West. Your support helps us bring these powerful stories back to life.